My name is Pamela Smith Davis. 91. I was a business administration major with a concentration in finance, but I ended up not staying in that field very, very long and went to grad school and went into teaching. So I took his civil rights class my junior year, and I've always loved history. Took a lot of history courses when I was at Mary Washington. Actually, if I go back and look at my transcripts, I could have minored in American Studies very easily. Wow. Yeah. That was what allowed me, when I went to my master's program, to certify to teach social studies. Actually, was from all the history and geography and poli-sci that I had taken at Mary Washington. All those gen ed courses paid off. Oh. So the biggest thing that I remember from his class was his stories. His stories were just so vivid. He was such a great storyteller. He added a lot of detail. His memory was amazing. I remember him telling us a story about Freedom Summer, when he and some of his colleagues in Corps were actually in Mississippi. When Cheney and the two other young people who were down there helping with voter registration were killed. And he was somewhere in Mississippi, and he was hiding out in a funeral home, and actually escaped from that town in the back of a hearse. That was one of the stories that really stuck with me. Just, you know, his experiences were just almost unbelievable. But certainly it did, you know, he was a piece of living history. So it was just an honor. It was very humbling, sitting in his class and just listening to his stories that he told. Of course, you know, we read his book, Lay Bare the Heart, as part of the course. And at that time, I believe it was Ken Burns who was putting together Eyes on the Prize, that PBS series. So we got to see some of that series before it ever came out on TV. It was such a blessing to be able to take that class from someone who actually was there and lived it. I remember it being, probably about 30. It was one of the larger classes, of course, not like Eastern and Western Anglo geography, which was in the, there used to be an auditorium in Monroe. I'm assuming that it's still there. Yeah. Besides that class being the largest class, everybody wanted to get into Dr. Farmer's civil rights class. Everybody did. And I just got lucky my junior year, because back then you signed up, you registered for classes based on how many credits you had. So the more credits you had, the earlier you were able to sign up for classes. Right. I had more credit hours than the rest of my, a lot of people in my class, because I took summer classes. And so I finished a semester early. So I was able to register for his class my junior year. And I think there may have been like 20, 30 of us in that, and I can't recall how many sections of the class that he offered. But it wasn't, it was one of the larger classes, but it wasn't too large. Right. None of the classes at Mary Washington were very large, which is a great selling point for the university. So. Well, I saw the bust of him right across from, I think it's across from Trinkle, or what is now being renamed, which, by the way, I think should be named Farmer Hall. That's just my opinion. That's what I voted for in the survey. I'll just tell you. So I've seen that there. I do know that, and I wish I was able to have seen the bus, the commemorative bus for the Freedom Rides, that went around to several of the school divisions, and there on campus. I was not able to see that. Would have loved to have seen that. But, you know, I think one of the highest honors that the college, the university can give him is naming Trinkle after him.
Right.
You know, he was older, of course. When I was there, he was just about partially blind. So he did have an aide that would walk him in. I mean, and guide him into the classroom, and he sat behind his desk. He could see us if we were in a certain area of the room. He did wear a patch. He was, he had the patch on his eye at that time. He's the biggest piece I remember about him was him being such a phenomenal storyteller. I had never heard of CORE before I had gotten to that class. I mean, I knew about Rosa Parks. I knew the Montgomery bus boycott. I knew, about those things, but he never knew any other organization other than the SCLC and Martin Luther King. And he really, opened my mind and my knowledge base on just how deep the civil rights movement was beyond Dr. Martin Luther King. And that it really didn't start with Dr. Martin Luther King. It had started, a decade prior to that. Right after World War II. So, and it was just, and that's what I remember about him most is, just his storytelling. He didn't do much in the way of, walking around the class when he taught. He did teach from his chair. He did sneak in some of those clips of what we now know as Eyes on the Prize, because he's in them. We had to write a paper for his class, and the paper had to be about a time where we had experienced discrimination. And I wrote about an incident that happened at my high school when I was a freshman, where we came to school one Monday morning with racist epitaphs written all over our parking lot. There had been a cross burned out on our pitcher's mound and at the baseball field in front of our school, and wrote about just how, frightened I was as a, young girl, and never really understood, why somebody would be that way, because I was a member of a pretty diverse school. Charlottesville High School is pretty diverse for this area. And so I remember researching that and writing about that. So, and I still have that paper.
Wow.
That's, I saved a few things from my time at Mary Washington, and that's one of them. But it definitely, and as a history teacher, I taught history for about 15 years. And, those are the lessons and the stories that aren't found in the history books. And so I would bring that into the classroom myself, just, you know, to honor him and
Right.
honor, you know, the work of others that aren't mentioned so much in the history books. And so I think that's what he really made me appreciate, is that there's more to the story than what we read in books. And you know, and that is a lesson that I've, you know, kind of held on to all this time. I would say he was somewhere in between. We had, you know, I assume we had quizzes or whatever. They never stood out in my brain. The paper did. And we always talked about the paper. You know, he always said, you know, how's it going? You should be doing this by now. You should be doing that by now. So, you know, he wasn't a professor that kind of kept the goal or the target from you. He always, you know, kind of gave you the timeline of what he expected by when. It wasn't, you know, something that you just turned in at the end of the time. It was a process. And, you know, I think I got an A on that paper. I'm pretty sure I did. You know, again, the biggest lesson that he taught me was that there's more to the story than what you read in the history books. And to really inquire, you know, kind of, you know, have kids dig deeper than what they're learning or getting from, you know, just, you know, one or two sources, that there are other players that are 9 times out of 10 behind the scenes of everything else that they're reading about. And they are just as important as those big name people that show up in history books.
Right.
It was, you know, you're just in awe of someone that, you know, really lived it, and, you know, and had such a big influence. And why he isn't mentioned more in you know, the history books is beyond me. But I you know, I hope in my tenure as an educator, I have brought his story, you know, to my students in an honorable way. So
yeah.